It would take just a few minutes on a Boris bike from Westminster to the palace, but for the man after whom they are named, it was a more circuitous route, the choreography meticulously planned. Moments after Theresa May left the palace, having tendered her resignation, Boris Johnson, having waited patiently for his cue, began the journey. He has, say his friends, been waiting for this his entire life. There was, though, a short delay. Protesters briefly blocked his path. Once inside, the formal ceremony, kissing hands, the monarch's invitation to form a government. On the steps of Downing Street, the new team assembled. More protesters greeted the new Prime Minister's car. The walk up Downing Street to a new life. He promised to deliver Brexit on time.
We're going to fulfil the repeated promises of Parliament to the people and come out of the EU on October the 31st. No ifs or buts. And we will do a new deal, a better deal, that will maximise the opportunities of Brexit while allowing us to develop a new and exciting partnership with the rest of Europe, based on free trade and mutual support. I have every confidence that in 99 days' time we will have cracked it.
But then he promised a whole lot more.
My job is to serve you, the people, because if there is one point we politicians need to remember, it is that the people are our bosses. My job is to make your streets safer. I'm going to go in with another 20,000 police on the streets, and we start recruiting forthwith. My job is to make sure you don't have to wait 3 weeks to see your GP. And we start work this week with 20 new hospital upgrades and ensuring that the money for the NHS really does get to the front line.
A list of pledges that would challenge a Prime Minister with a huge majority and a united party behind him. Prime Minister Johnson has neither. Despite, or perhaps because of this, Mr Johnson advocates a new mood of can-do optimism.
After 3 years of unfounded self-doubt, it is time to change the record, to recover our natural and historic role as an enterprising, outward-looking and truly global Britain, generous in temper and engaged with the world. No one in the last few centuries has succeeded in betting against the pluck and nerve and ambition of this country. They will not succeed today. We, in this government, will work flat out to give this country the leadership it deserves. And that work begins now. Thank you very much.
And so in through the famous door. What sort of Prime Minister will Boris Johnson be? Many who've watched his rise with dismay think they know, predicting disaster. His friends suggest a different future, a politician, they say, ready to become a great leader. What no one is predicting, though, is that the Johnson era will be boring.
David Grossman there. Well, joining us now, the Deputy Chair of the Conservative Party, Helen Whately. This is looking like a vote leave takeover of your party.
What's clear is that Boris Johnson said that he will take the country out of the European Union by the 31st of October. And he's chosen a cabinet that will come behind him and enable him to do that. And that is absolutely the mission that he's set himself.
I thought that D in dude was about unity. This isn't unity at all. This is chucking out everyone who isn't a Boris loyalist. It's not even about Remainers and Leavers. It's, are you loyal to Boris Johnson? And if you're not, go on.
Well, my view is the thing that's dividing the country at the moment is Brexit. And we have to get on and leave. We have to deliver on the referendum result. Until we've done that, the country really won't come together. So that's why.
How do you explain somebody like Penny Mordaunt? Was that just because she supported Jeremy Hunt? I mean, she's a Brexiteer. She's been phenomenally good at her job. She's in a powerful position as the first female. I just, you know, you've been very supportive of women and equality and all the rest of it. I wonder I wonder how that strikes you.
I think Penny Mordaunt is fab, but I'm really sorry to see her no longer in the cabinet. But I do think it's absolutely up to Boris to choose a team that he thinks will enable him to deliver on leaving the European Union. And everyone has said it's such a difficult time. It's a really difficult job for the Prime Minister to do that with a divided Parliament as well. So he's choosing the team to enable him to do that.
Nick Bowles said tonight the hard right has taken over the party. There's only a few neutered captives left for window dressing. Are you feeling like a neutered captive?
Not at all, not at all. But I do think that we need to have collective cabinet responsibility. What's been so frustrating for MPs like myself, who've been voting for the deal, voting to leave, is that we haven't had everybody united behind a Prime Minister and a cabinet who we know were there backing the Prime Minister to get on and
people like
do Brexit.
yourself who have been so outspoken about the damage that no deal will do. I mean, you talked about that. As we leave the EU, we should do so in a way that works for the economy, for people's jobs and livelihoods. You talked about tucking in your children and praying that they would wake up to a better future. Honestly, you're staring no deal in the face now with a cabinet that's been organised by Dom Cummings.
Well, I've been clear throughout that I think a deal is much better than leaving without a deal. But actually, if you look at my voting record, I voted to keep no deal on the table because I think first and foremost we have to leave, and also being serious about no deal is the best way to get a deal. But most importantly for this country, we have to deliver on the referendum
I hear what
result.
you're saying, but you can see where the moderates, the Liberals, if you like, the Remainers, anyone who was part of that 48% is out. Jacob Rees-Mogg is now leader of the House, so we know he'll attend cabinet. That's the ERG right at the centre table. I'm wondering, for somebody like you who said we've got to pay the 39 billion come what may, what you make of those comments that, you know, Boris, extra lubrication, what a phrase, will withhold that. You've said it's owed to the EU, we've made that commitment. And if we end up with no deal, it doesn't mean we keep the money. Are you going to tell him that?
Well, I think it's really important that we leave. As I just said, I think that the best way to leave is with a deal, but no deal is also the best way to get a good deal. But the other thing I think it's important to say, as Boris has said himself
like
on the step
tonight.
Well, I think I also want to say
you sound like somebody who's sort of lost track of what your party has now become, and you've got to be the deputy chairman. You've got to be the one that unifies the people that don't share that top table of ERG and vote leave. You've got to bring those people together. How do you do
I
it?
will genuinely say to you, in the run-up to the 29th of March, I was really frustrated when no deal was taken off the table, because to me, that was the moment when we had the most negotiation leverage, when if we could have pushed through, that was a point at which I think we could have got a deal that really would have got the country's backing. So I hope, and Parliament's backing, I hope that that is what we can do between now and the 31st of October.
And now you've got 17 new enemies on the back benches, and presumably you're putting the party on an election footing. Are you readying for an election?
Well, talking about colleagues on the backbenches, my message continues to be to colleagues on the backbenches. We must unite and come together to do this as a party.
Do you think they'll be feeling like that tonight? Do you think Jeremy Hunt's going to be as supportive as his tweet suggested?
Well, I mean, you take him for his word, and I think really, really good people are now going to be the backbenchers making the case. But the other thing to talk about is also that Boris has set out a vision for the domestic agenda, which I think is important not to overlook. Whether it's making sure the NHS money gets to the front line so we start seeing improvements in health services, something I feel very strongly about is social care.
He was talking about unity, wasn't he? And then he comes out with these phrases like, you know, we're going to bet against the people, you know, the people who bet against Britain. Wasn't that one of his phrases? Betting against the pluck and ambition of this country. The people who bet against Britain will lose their shirts. Who are these people that bet against Britain? Who's he talking about?
Well, I've heard Jeremy Corbyn talk Britain down quite a lot, so that's exactly the sort of it's exactly the people who talk Britain down. One thing that I've noticed just today is this sense of optimism, energy that things are moving on. And as I said on the domestic agenda, this sense of energy that we are going to be boosting businesses, boosting entrepreneurs, we are going to be doing the right things for the economy.
Energy's going to win the day.
And for the public sector.
OK. Helen Whately, thanks very much indeed. Well, Jo Swinson, the Lib Dem leader, as of 3 days, is with me now. Probably not going to get much of a honeymoon as things stand. Also joining us, Steve Brine, who resigned as a minister over no-deal threats not so long ago, and a close ally of Jeremy Hunt, and for Labour, Anneliese Dodds of the Treasury team. Jo, let me start with you. Are you now on an election footing? What's your first move?
Absolutely, we're on election footing, and frankly, bring it on, because this government will have, people shouting at the television across the country when they see a Home Secretary who said she wants to bring back the death penalty, a Chancellor who wants to cut taxes for the richest 1%, and Jacob Rees-Mogg in cabinet as the leader of the House, and Dom Cummings, in Number 10, the mastermind of Vote Leave, who famously responsible for the lies on the side of that bus, right at the heart of Number 10. So how can we possibly have confidence in this government?
So what do you do?
Well, so we've tabled an EDM tonight. We've written to Jeremy Corbyn as leader of the opposition, who's got the opportunity to call for a vote of no confidence. I certainly look at this set of decisions and say I have no confidence. So this is an early day motion
that means you have no confidence in
I
Boris
have
Johnson.
absolutely no confidence in Boris Johnson.
But it doesn't work without Labour.
We absolutely need, the way that this works in Parliament is to have a formal no confidence vote. It is up to the leader of the opposition who has the opportunity to
I thought you
request that.
dismissed yesterday working with Jeremy Corbyn. Didn't you rule out?
I ruled out going into government with Jeremy Corbyn, and I absolutely think that he is not the right person to be Prime Minister, but I have no confidence in Boris Johnson, and a general election would give us the opportunity to elect a different government, to elect a Liberal Democrat government.
Isn't the truth now that the Remainers have lost the Remain battle, and the best thing you can do is settle for something that is better than no deal?
Not at all, and nobody should be fooled by that. We're sitting here in July. We have not left the European Union. We are members of the European Union, and so stopping Brexit is absolutely possible. And in fact, it is necessary, because there's all sorts of issues we need to be dealing with in this country. We need to be tackling poverty. We need to be dealing with the climate emergency. And Brexit makes all of those things harder to deal with.
You could do that, presumably, with Labour. Are you ruling out being in any kind of coalition, any kind of government with Labour, or is it just about Jeremy Corbyn? I don't understand that.
The first thing I would say in a general election is I want to get Liberal Democrat MPs elected, and I think that the way that politics is volatile at the moment, a poll out today had us ahead of Labour, 2 points behind the Conservatives. So anything can happen, and there's no limit on my ambition for the Liberal Democrats.
So don't rule out working with a big party then?
Well, I'm not ruling out the Liberal Democrats being a big party, being the biggest party in the next Parliament. In terms of Labour, I work with Labour MPs all the time on the People's Vote campaign. It's incredibly important that we have that cross-party working. The difference with Jeremy Corbyn is he's a Brexiteer. He has said he wants to facilitate Brexit. He wants Brexit to happen. Just today, his party spokesperson was asked, are Labour a party of Remain? And he said no, that's not the case.
You're probably not going to get your people's vote.
Well, look, I think that is still deliverable, and who knows, we may be in a general election where it's going to be obvious that the Liberal Democrats are the clear party of Remain.
Come on, talk us through this now, because we're past campaigning, we're past all the rhetoric, right? We've got Dominic Cummings, Vote Leave,
Absolutely.
who know what they're doing, who are pretty strategically clear, who are pushing towards a Brexit by October the 31st. You tell me how that's not going to happen now. Spell it out.
OK, well, I think there's different ways in which that can be avoided. I think one way is to have taken control of the order paper when the House returns, in the way that was done in March, for example, in order to legislate to have a people's vote. Now, that requires us getting a majority. We had 280 votes last time round, so that does require getting some more MPs on board. There's a few more MPs from the Conservative benches who are rather unhappy right now.
Have you had conversations with them?
Of course we've had conversations.
What, with the 17 that have been fired this evening?
Not with all those 17, not with all of those 17, but certainly...
So you are speaking to some of them, are you?
About how do we get our country back on the right track? Absolutely.
Can I just clarify, have you had conversations
about
this
how do we
evening?
secure people's vote? Not this evening, in the last few days, when I've seen people around in Parliament. Because we are facing a moment for our country that is hugely damaging, and people have to work together across party, and that is what the People's Vote campaign has been all about, and that is the best way to stop Brexit.
Jo Swinson, thanks. Anneliese Dodds, why doesn't Corbyn recognise that we're facing a moment that could be hugely damaging? Why has it got to come from the Lib Dems or the Scottish National Party to table this no confidence vote, and why isn't he?
Well, I think Jeremy certainly does recognise we're in a very, very worrying position. He's been listening to the country on that, with many, many people saying, regardless of party political affiliation, that they're very worried about this very ideological turn that our government seems to be taking. Around a no confidence vote, though, there's not a lot of sense in tabling one unless you're sure that you can win it. And actually, I don't see currently, even amongst those very disaffected Conservative MPs, that many of them at this stage, immediately after the election of Boris Johnson as the new Prime Minister, that they might be willing to do that. Of those that I have talked to, and many of them are quite stunned and shocked, actually, that you've got, for example, Secretaries of State who've been sacked for breaking security rules and this kind of thing. Even amongst them, I haven't heard from them that they are keen to support that. Of course, if the situation changes, I'm sure that that's something that Labour would want to look at.
You do recognise that time is running out, though. I mean, the reason Jo Swinson's doing it tomorrow is because you haven't got very long. You haven't even got long enough to have a general election before Brexit.
Of course, and I think for a huge number of us, actually, the biggest concern is that we could have that no-deal Brexit that would be so damaging, for which there's no public mandate whatsoever. We had very large numbers of people from right across the country coming today to talk to us about that, from manufacturing sectors, and actually a number of Conservative MPs coming along to say, yes, we agree that no deal would be damaging. So we are doing everything in our power to try and stop that.
He's just been woefully slow. I mean, he's only just talking about people's vote at a point when actually Remain has become almost irrelevant now.
Well, I remember, with respect, talking to you before when people were saying that there was a need for compromise, that it was necessary for Labour to try and work with the then Theresa May government to try and get some compromise, some way out of that. Obviously, Jeremy did try for very many months to talk to the Conservatives. Unfortunately, they weren't willing to compromise at all, and it takes two to tango. I think it was right that Jeremy tried back then. However, sadly, he didn't get anywhere with that because of the lack of willingness from the Conservative side. As a result, things have changed. And, it's very clear that Boris Johnson, particularly with this cabinet, is going to be taking the country in really quite an extreme direction, a very ideological direction. He's not going to be willing to compromise. That does mean we have to take a different tack.
Does that worry you, Steve Brine? Do you feel that this is an extreme direction for the Conservatives now? I'll just tell you, Jo Johnson has actually got a position in Cabinet. That's Boris Johnson's brother, Business and Energy. A rare Remainer, possibly with a family connection that helps.
Well, I mean, first of all, it's great for a reshuffle that you don't have skin in the game. I have to say, it's very refreshing to be able to watch it when you're not wanting or expecting anything. I mean, I had issues with the reshuffle. I mean, I did a lot of media yesterday, and I said to the BBC as well that Boris would start with a blank piece of paper for me. Clearly, he wasn't my pick. I was very much part of Jeremy's campaign team. Maybe we'll get onto that. But he'd start with a blank piece of paper, and I would judge him on what he does and who he appoints in those first 12, 24 hours. I'm not wild about the cabinet that's been appointed. I think the unity bit.
Can I just check, when you say not wild, do you feel like Nick Bowles does, that it's moved significantly to the right?
Not
and it's been a takeover of the
Not necessarily,
lead?
because the cabinet is just one element of government in this country. There is, of course, the small matter of the House of Commons where we do not have a majority. So, I have issues with the way that the reshuffle has reached across the party to people like me. But also,
literally one half of your party has been thrown out. It's as simple as that. Isn't it?
The Penny Mordaunt issue baffles me. Penny has been sacked because she backed Jeremy. She was, apparently he has a problem with women in the cabinet. She's a woman in a cabinet post. Shouldn't just be there because she's a woman. She's a fantastic Defence Secretary, the first woman Defence Secretary, a round peg in round hole if ever I saw one.
So is this about retribution then?
Yes, that does happen in reshuffles. I'm sorry to let your viewers in on that. But then, Jeremy, I think the people who got knocked out in the first round of the leadership election are in the cabinet, and the person who got to the final two and got 46,500 of our members to vote for him is out.
Now, Jacob Rees-Mogg said it was a weird thing for Jeremy Hunt to refuse to do defence, particularly when he thought it was important enough to put more money in. Would you share that? You've spoken to Jeremy this evening.
I have spoken to Jeremy this evening, and I think that the country's missed out on a great Prime Minister in Jeremy. But I accept the result of the leadership election, and I've congratulated Boris already for winning, and I really wish him well, and I want him to succeed, not for my party, but for my constituency and for my country, and I really wish him well for it. But I think that Jeremy should have stayed in post. It was a demotion to go to Defence Secretary, there's no question about that. Malcolm Rifkin said that earlier when he was promoted up from Defence to Foreign.
So it's not just Jeremy, is it? It's Jeremy who's been very gracious tonight in his tweet, as has Penny Mordaunt, as have all the others. But what happens to those 17 now? Are they as as happily loyal
Well,
as they sound?
They will come and join me. The back bench is the new front bench. I'm thoroughly enjoying myself on the back benches and really enjoying a lot of the work that I did in government that's still eking out. And I'm really enjoying doing a lot of my constituency stuff. And they're all going to be there on the back benches with me. And I think there's going to be a lot of talent on the back benches.
Now, what does that mean?
There's a lot of talent on the Labour back benches that don't want to serve.
The back bench is the new front bench, and you've got a
lot
lot of talent. So are you going to use this constructively to stop a direction of travel which you've just said you don't like?
What I mean by a lot of talent is there are people who know how government works, of which I was a small part of, and there are people who've been at the very heart of government. There are people who know how to ask serious and good questions, and the Prime Minister, the former Prime Minister, said that she'd be the one asking questions now. So actually we will be a force on the backbenches in a young Parliament, and that's absolutely right, because that's how it should be. And that's why I think the you bit of dude has been a missed opportunity today. I can't believe we're talking dudes. But, The Great Lebowski was a good film, but not in politics, please. But, the you bit disappoints me, because I think in a hung Parliament, you need unity more than ever and reach across the aisle.
Isn't that the side that you are naturally on?
Something I completely agree with Steve on is that there are some really talented people who are going to be making fantastic speeches from the back benches, and that will be very good to see. But I do think ultimately the Prime Minister has to choose the team that they believe is going to help them deliver.
So I totally agree. The Prime Minister has to choose the team that he's comfortable with. No other business would you have. You wouldn't have the people here in your Newsnight team that you weren't comfortable with. He has to have those people he's comfortable with. But, we shouldn't just run down the people that he's appointed. So, in terms of, I talked about round pegs in round holes. Sajid Javid is actually going to be an excellent Chancellor. He comes from a very, very good financial background. Michael Gove is somebody, yes, he's controversial, but Michael Gove is somebody who gets the civil service to work for him. And Robert Buckland is one of the good legal minds of our generation.
Okay.
So actually, there are some very good appointments in there tonight.
We will see what happens with optimism.